All right. For those of you in the room that do not know who I am, I will be moderating today's fireside chat. My name is Katrina Villanueva. I am the Central Time Remote Immersives lead engineering instructor. So I'm really excited to be here with everybody today. I know that we are expecting folks who are prospective students. We also have some alums in the room. So a great variety of attendees, maybe from just starting their journey to have already kind of like moved past the education stage and are now working. So really excited to have you all here. There will be a portion in the end where I will open the floor to anybody who wants to ask any questions, but we are going to be covering a lot of ground today, right? So I'm very, very excited to touch on a lot of these kind of like important aspects that we are going to be discussing today. But here we have Queen Raae, as her name is written on her Zoom, but it's Benedicte Raae, and she is a seasoned software engineer from Oslo, Norway. So definitely joining us at a very different time. Thankful for you joining us at nighttime there. But Queen Raae is very, very active on Twitter. So if you have a Twitter account, definitely give her a follow. She also has a YouTube channel where she does live streams, some tutorials. You're going to get a glimpse of her family life. I love that we were able to see her daughter just a little bit ago, and where she also shares some projects that she is passionate about, that she is also like working on. And a lot of the apps, we're going to be talking about some of these apps that she has worked on, but a lot of the apps that she has created are not just passion projects, but also those that are trusted by the DNB, which is the Norwegian bank, the Swedish Armed Forces, the Norwegian Water Resources and Energy Directorate. So a lot of important companies and organizations relying on her application. So we're very, very honored to definitely have Raae in the room with us. So just as kind of we mentioned in the little brief talking about what this fireside chat is going to be covering, we're just going to get to know Raae a little bit better, right? We're going to be talking about her presence in the software engineering community. We're going to touch on some of her side projects that hopefully will inspire you all. Also, we're going to touch on a few other things outside of the technological aspect of software engineer. We're going to talk about maybe finding balance between career, your personal life, right? And also forging your own way and finding your voice in the tech industry. So hopefully some of those topics are really resonating with you all and that you're getting excited about what's to come. So yeah, very excited to have you all here. So without further ado, I think it's time. We should get started. All right. So Raae, I feel like as with any success story, I think definitely one of the first things that pops into people's minds are what is your journey like, right? Like, where did you start from? So let's start from the beginning. Why did you decide to pursue software engineering?
Yeah, so it's this can be a long story.
I love it. Let's do it.
No, you can ask follow-up questions where you want to, because
Sure.
I just turned 40 and I
Okay.
have a traditional background, so I've been around for quite a while. I started coding. I guess I started dabbling with HTML and CSS way back in junior high when my Norwegian teacher was like, "Oh, I went to this further advancement course." Like, he went on some kind of conference and like, I think this is like a cool thing. And he told me, and actually I think two of the other girls in my class, was like, I think this is something for you. So we then had like a web class as an elective. We created a website for the school, I think. So this was back when I was 13, I guess.
That's
And
an
then I
early
just
start. I love that.
that is an early start, but I was never one who like ended up just coding 24/7, like in my room with my Red Bulls or whatever was that at the time. So that was actually kind of my start into anything that has like web related or anything coding related. But interestingly, my mother is actually a developer, and ended up becoming a CTO for hire, and was also a developer evangelist at one point, which we can circle back to, because at the time we were like, what are you evangelizing?
Yeah, what
Like,
is
this
this?
is like, what, you know, especially for us Norwegians. But she never, like, she wasn't a web developer. But she gave me access to a computer, and I remember I've been scared of the terminal ever since. I'm like, we're on friendly terms now, but she was like, oh, you can do anything with this machine, just like don't go into the terminal and like do this command. And I still don't know what the command is, because I never want to do it, but it's like recursively deleting your whole hard drive, right? Like,
Oh
she was like,
gosh.
and I was like, oh my God, can I do that now that I have these powers? So I never like got into the terminal until, yeah, I would say like the five to 10. I would always like try to get my way around, because like I had that fear, which is funny. So she gave me that opportunity, but also instilled some fear in me. But then the Norwegian teacher was the one that was actually, like open the web kind of, and the web was a different place. It wasn't, well, I had friends who like met up with strange people they met online, like, but parents weren't as, concerned. They didn't really know what we were doing,
Yeah.
right? So I just had a lot of fun on the internet. I did like my next kind of coding project was, well, at this time I thought I would be a graphic designer. So I actually ended up attending an Adobe conference in London, because my dad lived in London, and I was like, this is what I want to do. When I was like 15 or something, I walked around this conference, kind of forgotten about that. Yeah, I don't think every 15-year-old does that, but I did that anyway. And but then, so I was like more using the web, and just like having fun with it. But then for I guess 2000, for like a theater production at school, or like a cabaret
Mhm.
in high school, I was in the PR team, and I was tasked with creating the web page. And that's the first time I did JavaScript, because that was then for the like photo gallery,
Okay.
that we were going to have like a sliding gallery. And also, back when code editors weren't as good. So I spent like hours debugging, and I remember getting my mom to help, because she was taking some like web dev course at the time to like learn more about the web.
Mhm.
And we just couldn't figure it out. I even wrote it out, and it turns out I'm quite dyslexic. So I'd written height wrong, like, two
Oh,
different ways. Yeah.
syntax
So
errors will get you.
then, yes. So I'm very happy now that we do have some more kind of help along the way. Yeah, so that was like my early start. And then I decided to go to engineering university here in Norway, the Norwegian Technical University no, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, which both my parents went to. So it was kind of like it's one of the most hereditary, I think, degrees in Norway,
Oh wow.
and like top 5. So kind of predestined, I guess. I tried to get into like the business
Yeah.
line, because like that's, you had to have more points to get in there. And this was 2003. So what's the bubble? I guess the dot-com bubble, I guess it was. Yeah, some
Okay.
bubble had burst. So nobody wanted to do computer science, but I kind of liked it. So it was like my safe choice. But I'm very happy that I landed there and not in and kind of the more like business school version of still engineering college, but like the business school version.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I also just wanted to like preface for everyone, listening, that I do live in Norway, which is one of the wealthier countries in the world, with quite high, like, we're not 100% there yet, but like equality is pretty high, and university is free. So kind of like have that in the back of your mind when I'm like talking about my experience in this field. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that kind of like, yeah, a little disclaimer there, because it's true. I love that you said computer science was kind of like your safe choice. Whereas for a lot of folks, maybe in this room, who maybe are pursuing it like later in life, or, it's definitely like a scarier choice, because it's like, computer science, like tech is huge, and it's hard, and it's demanding. And so I kind of like love that you pointed that out. And as you said, it's predestined. You have it in your blood, you have it in your history. So I'm glad that you had a lot of those like resources and kind of inspiration from your mom, kind of like moving forward. So that's kind of amazing. But what I love is, like, even though you had all of those things around you, I think that something that I noticed, just kind of like you know, speaking with you and also just like looking through like your presence in social media is that you really have a heavy hand in terms of like where your path is going. And I think that is kind of like one of the big topics of today is how do you make an impact in the developer community? So with kind of like your side projects and everything that you've kind of like you've dived into, right? You've created opportunities for yourself and have found opportunities to share that knowledge and educate other people, whether it's through your YouTube channel, which by the way, for everybody in the room, definitely check out Raae's YouTube channel. It's Queen Raae, so definitely check that out. It's really, really an amazing resource. So I guess I'm just curious, like, what were your motivations to go down this path, to start your own channel? What was your initial vision for your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so then we're jumping. So I started uni in 2003, and I guess
Okay.
I launched the YouTube channel as a pandemic project in 2020, the summer of 2020. The vision then was kind of like I'd been wanting to make like a lot of YouTubers, you know, make like a day in my life type
Yeah.
videos, but like with more of a tech, like how is it to be, you know, working in tech, but still like with the family and kind of that part. It's changed because it's hard making videos and edited videos. And as with many of my projects, like I do them as a challenge. Like I just want to see if I can do it. And then I don't always, and this is not like a recommendation, but so I don't always have a vision for them. It's more of like, you know, challenge. But then what I found as I'm doing a lot of these kind of challenges to myself, like that's how I figure out what things I do like and what I do enjoy about like, why was I looking at that, doing that thing? And then by doing it, because as you know, as a lot of other people, I've been thinking about this YouTube channel, like, you know, I should do something on YouTube for like a long time. Regret I didn't start it earlier, regret that I didn't keep it up more since
Yeah.
2020. But so the initial challenge was kind of doing that. And I also had a side project going at the time that we'll talk about, which is POW, a menstrual cycle tracker. So I was like, also like, oh, I could maybe then also document kind of that journey, and it will be a marketing aspect too. But then through kind of starting that and through doing that and realizing that maybe I didn't have the resources to edit as many videos as I thought, and also when I didn't really like know where I wanted to like take this channel, I did something else, which I never thought I'd do, which is like one of the few things I've been really, really scared of doing. Like some of my challenges have been like, I'm a little scared, but
Okay.
like, okay. But this is one of those things that I never would have thought I'd do. And that was live coding. So like through this journey, somebody challenged me to live code my work on POW. And then I did that. And then that evolved into a show about Gatsby, because we were then focusing on Gatsby and becoming Gatsby authority, me and my partner, and then my daughter.
Gotcha.
So he created this whole kind of pirate show where I became the queen, and my daughter is the pirate princess, and he's the captain. And then we've been live streaming ever since. But then through all, like, you know, life is a journey, and like
Yes.
middle aged, and you know, you wonder about like the choices you made and the future choices and all that. But anyway, so now I'm debating like focusing on it again and like trying to do both the streams and more of the edited videos and try to actually grow it. And
Yes.
I think one of the reasons for that is that somebody asked me, like, what was the, like, how's it formless? But like, what's one of your fondest memory of your journey or your like indie hacking journey? Because I'm kind of in that space as well. There's like a indie hacking community, and then there's a developer community, and I'm kind of like floating between the two. But anyway, what popped into my mind was that this woman told me in Budapest for Budapest JS Conf 2019, where I did a talk, and then Lillian, my daughter, the pirate princess, came on stage when people were applauding. And then later that night, like over the drinks, she was like, I hadn't really realized that I could be a mom and still a coder.
Yeah.
And that's what popped into my mind, like when I got this question a couple of weeks ago, and then, you know, other things that have happened, I'm like, well, maybe I should actually intentionally grow the channel and try to be big, because maybe there is a purpose there in like being somebody who is very visible, because I do have the opportunity to be visible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that answered it. So maybe there will be more. And also because I ended up at a conference in San Francisco, I talking to a guy who has like 170,000 YouTube subscribers or
Okay.
something insane like this. And he is super open. We ended up doing a live Q&A on his channel where I just
Mhm.
asked him a lot of things about content creation. And at this point, he gets, I think, $10,000 per video.
Wow. Very
So
lucrative.
if somebody wonders about the money in these like in these things, go check. That was James Q Quick. So he's very transparent and he runs a Discord trying to help other people. So I don't know if I'll ever be at that level, but it's like, oh, there's, like actual money. Because if you try
Yeah.
to research this around YouTube, they always talk about AdSense and you
Mhm.
have your view, like then you'll have to be like one of those big lifestyle kind of
Yes.
influencer to actually be making money. But then
Yeah.
since tech is tech, the brand deals are supposedly much better than in other industries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
that's my thought
amazing.
about YouTube.
Yeah. No, and kind of
It's
like,
in process. It's in progress.
absolutely. And I kind of like what I love kind of like just hearing about your journey is that like, even though, you were mentioning like, oh, I don't know that I really had a vision for it. You know what I mean? The fact that you did just start it and kind of like discover what was important and what was resonating with people along the way, I think is kind of like a big part of the story, because I feel like it's going to encourage folks in the room, for example, to just like, if you have an idea, just jump on it and it'll kind of like reveal its kind of like purpose to you over time. And I love that you talk about kind of like the involvement of your husband, the involvement of your daughter, because I think that is such a big part of your kind of like YouTube presence, is you as a software engineer, but you also kind of like sharing a glimpse again of your like family life. So I'm curious, like, what are the pros and cons of kind of like being that transparent about your family life and kind of like really merging the two, like your career and family in one?
So far, there haven't kind of like been any cons from like the outside. Like people seem to respond very well to it. And also
Yes.
I am not, Twitter or YouTube famous yet. So this might change. We also try because I was more inspired, by the lifestyle bloggers that we all follow, even
Yeah,
if we maybe try to tell ourselves that we don't.
I do.
But so I was like I wanted that vibe, right? But I
Yes.
didn't, but still be me. And like I'm a developer. So kind of it wasn't like very then like conscious, like, oh, I want to show people like you can be like a mom and a developer, even though she told me that in 2019, but that kind of resurfaces now when
Mhm.
it popped into my brain. But it was more that like kind of like cool like media. I don't know, like way back when I want to be a designer, like media brand. Anyway, back to your question, the pros and the cons. So I don't feel, and also we, in our scenario, we wouldn't end up kind of like monetizing her, like my
Yeah,
daughter, in a
yeah,
way, like which is different from like in other industries. Like she just
mhm.
shows up when she wants. She's in our streams because we have to stream at night if we're going to hit the American market, and
Mm.
she's awake, so like she's gonna show up. Like there's so then her dad was like, she's a part of the intro and the outro, and she feels ownership. Like
Yes.
if it's Thursday, she's like, we're gonna have the pirate show, because then she gets to stay up late as well. She's like, pirate show. And then she made stickers when I went to San Francisco for Jamstack that I handed out, and people loved the stickers. And I think it's good for kids. And I guess like my mom included me on a lot of things because she was a single mom. So I ended up just having to tag along to a lot of
Mhm.
things for me. For me, that's been kind of natural. And I also feel like if they kind of feel involved in what you're doing, you're not always being like, mom's working. It's more
Yes.
like, oh, I'm working on that thing, that we all do, like we do, which is
Yes.
a part of like our family. So yeah, so I haven't had like cons from that. Like working intimately with your partner can sometimes be up and sometimes be down.
Yeah. Have its challenges. Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah.
So
Uh,
but like from the outside, I feel like I've only had positive feedback, and I'm just going to try to focus. And also like surprisingly a lot of feedback, from the men who I feel maybe also haven't like felt like they can merge those roles, like family person and tech person. And I think it's a little bit also with my culture, like in Norway, we do not have such a distinction between our business persona and our private persona,
Yeah.
which I
Okay.
know that in America, there's a lot more, like you or used to be a lot more distinction about who you are at work and who you are as a private person.
Yes.
Super interesting book called The Culture Map, if you want to read about business cultures around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, but so I think also for me, it's just it's more the way we do it here in a way.
Yes.
We also have 12 months maternity leave, or not maternal and paternity leave. So you'll see at any tech conference in Norway, like there will always be strollers because like fine, like people will show up.
Yes.
The dads and the moms will like show up because you get a little stir crazy sitting at home, but you can't go to work, but you can go to conference, right? So
Right. Right.
people, yeah. So it's less weird here.
Gotcha.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very interesting for sure. Like there are a lot of things there that I didn't kind of like realize were just like some, like cultural underpinnings, you know what I mean? But I do think it's important to have conversations about this because it is kind of good to like understand that in some communities these things are normalized. Earlier today we talked about like just having like childcare in conferences, you know what I mean? Why is that not a thing? You know what I mean? Especially when these conferences run on days on end. So very, very different perspective for sure. And I love seeing that you're kind of like bringing that to the table with your platform. But speaking of conferences, or even earlier today, you mentioned that you were in the Jamstack conference, for example. And it seems like you just have such a presence in a lot of these conferences. So just for those of you, so I kind of want to segue our conversation into more like technical side where we can also start talking about your projects that you've been working on. But basically, speaking of Jamstack architecture, for those of you in the room that are not familiar, right, Jam stands for JavaScript, API, and markup. And so just from your perspective and just being knowledgeable in that term, what is the significance of Jamstack architecture and its role in web development?
I used to do a lot of WordPress development, so that's kind
Okay.
of because when I went to university, we didn't do any web, right? It was all
Yeah.
Java or .NET.
Mm-hmm.
But then I, moonlight as a web developer, like a WordPress developer, like a lot of us do. And I kept feeling kind of, that like disconnect about like wanting for websites, fine. But then I was helping a friend create a directory of what seafood you should and shouldn't eat based on some like environmental criteria.
Okay.
And I managed to do that in WordPress because it can be done, and with some
Mm-hmm.
like JavaScript backbone JS, I don't know, like something that I like slapped on top there. But that's when I started feeling kind of that disconnect, and especially as apps were coming out as well, the native, iOS apps and stuff like that. It just felt to me like the content should be separated from the way we are showing it. And kind of started going down that rabbit hole, especially for my side projects, because another aspect of WordPress is that it keeps getting security breaches if you just host it somewhere cheap.
Yes.
And it needs to be like upgraded, and it need to be this and that. And then I found Netlify like way back when, I think when they had this thing where you could see your number, what number customer you were. I was like 6,000 or something in the world.
Yeah.
I remember calling them because they went down when I had at launch. Anyway, so I found them and started like deploying things there. And I don't think I won't try to run any of these projects, like clone them locally and run them.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that I've built are still on Netlify running. Like they just keep
Love
on
it.
running, right? Because there
Yeah.
is no server there. So for me personally, just for side project, it just felt like a much better fit. And then at that time, I was mostly making money off of making native apps as a contractor.
Yeah.
So, but for the broader ecosystem, but now, like, why would you be like, oh, it's so great? It's like now we're seeing a backlash, right? Because all the editors want to see exactly what they're publishing.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like for that type of websites, like it's kind of come full circle.
Mhm.
Well, I'm rambling now. Let's try to like put this in
Keep it direct.
perspective. But I think still for like utility app or like utility websites or more like app-like websites, you really want that separation and being able to take technical choices for that is not coupled with whatever CMS you're using. But I think maybe for websites, we should maybe, for a lot of smaller websites, go back to the good old days of like WordPress or that kind of thing, because
Gotcha.
you see it breaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Okay.
more
No,
specific?
no, I
But no,
love
I
that.
remember, I do remember one specific point. I was working for the Norwegian Energy Directorate, Water and Resource, longest name. I was making their app, and we were going to pull in their phone number and their address and a couple of other things.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I can just hook up to your like your CMS's API and like get those. And they're like, the what? Like,
We know
so
what you're talking
we
about.
had to like copy paste, that information
Oh,
into the app.
hard
And that's when
coding.
I was like, this, like, no, like I went to university for this. Like there's such a thing as like data, but like it should be, because it was just there in like a big blob of text. It wasn't like actual pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to
And
parse through all that information. Yeah.
yeah, so we just had to copy paste it, right? So there's a Norwegian company that is like taking this very seriously, and I brought him to their like one of their first meetups, which is Sanity.io, which is in Norwegian. They're our neighbors. Anyway, and I brought like my contact there, and I was like,
Mhm.
you need to think about these things because you have a lot of data, not just like web page content, like because they're the ones that will tell you if there's a flood, if there's
Mhm.
like that kind of thing. So like so
Yeah.
that's kind of where my interest spiked in that kind of
Yeah.
in
I
that.
love that.
Yeah.
And also like, you're starting to talk about kind of like building web applications and deploying them and all of these things. And I know that a big part of kind of like your presence and a big part of your of what you've been doing is a lot of your like side projects. So I would love to kind of focus a little bit on that. One of the most recent ones that I think you posted about on your Twitter account is Prune Your Follows. So I would love to have you talk about what Prune Your Follows is.
Yeah, so as we've already established, 40 years old, been on Twitter for like 14, 15 years and follow people uncritically. So I was suddenly at the 5,000 limit. You're not allowed to follow more than 5,000 people on Twitter if you're not like very famous yourself or have a lot of followers. And I had no idea how to like start pruning and finding the people that I wanted kind of off, or like I wanted to remove the inactive people and they don't show up. And if you go into the Twitter UI, you have to go into your kind of following list, and then you have to scroll through like this infinite scroll, whereas
Mhm.
UI in the world where you're just like scrolling, and then you do something wrong and you're back on the top of the list. So I was like, there should be a better way, like all good side
Here's
projects
a
starts.
problem. Let's find a solution. Yes.
So, and I was like, oh, no more side projects for you, Missy. But I did that in a couple of days using Supabase, I think, just for fun.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, I'm not, like got enough on my plate. But then suddenly I felt like, as you said earlier, like you do all these things that you maybe not have a vision for.
Mhm.
Then they kind of like all came together because I was like, what if I sell this as a project that a tech company pays me to do, so it's marketing for them?
Mm.
Because that's basically what developer and advocates and developer evangelists, or whatever we want to call them, like that's what they do, but they're often employed, and by now I'm unemployable. But so I was like, what if I pitch this and then I can build it in public like all the indie hackers that I hang out with, but I'm kind of like paid to do this project. And there was a new database on the scene, SATA,
Okay.
which is a serverless database, and they said yes. So we built it as a build-in build blah blah, and then I need some water. A sponsored build-in public project, and that kind of started a new path for me, as I said, where like everything comes together, where it's like, oh, maybe what I've always been good at is like, typical DevRel activities. I still don't want to be employed probably, but could we potentially sell those types of activities that I just do because I just want to do them all the time, and then I go contracting, for the actual money. And I think there is, but like very early stages. So now we're creating a podcast for them because I also have a podcast. So I'm like practicing that. So next week we're starting recording a podcast for them as well. So that is super interesting. And that was like, well, now there's a way to just do side projects all day.
Yeah,
But,
I love
but we'll
that.
see. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that fares. But so
Yeah.
far, very fun. And it kind of shows where like you do a lot of different things. And I feel like, oh, I should have focused more on one side project. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so cool that you're an entrepreneur. I'm like, yeah, not really. I'm just like, they're more like art project, like I don't know, like they just have to be made. Like sometimes I just can't not make them. And now maybe I found a way where I can do that more as a living and not having to make businesses out of everyone.
Yes.
And Pruning Follows did pretty well. We were featured in TechCrunch, and we've now facilitated 25,000 unfollows as of this week. So that's kind of cool.
Congratulations. Very exciting
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you follow, let's not get into it, but there's a whole Twitter API debacle. So we are not spending so much time developing on it until we kind of know what's going on there.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Sounds
then
good.
um but if we want to go back to the project before that,
Yes.
which I think
Yes.
is
No,
how
I
I
love
ended up.
that. So yeah, Prune Your Follows, amazing application. Just kind of before we move on to kind of like POW, which I do want to talk about for a second, I just love some of these comments here that are coming in, and basically just how, and this is kind of the point, especially as having you as a guest, is like how we're loving, again, like just hearing about you finding your own passion and paving your own way. You're recognizing what your strengths are, what you're passionate about, and kind of like making it work for yourself. And I think that's really so important to kind of like communicate, is that there are so many possibilities. You just have to kind of like advocate for yourself, and realize kind of what your own strengths are. So it's really inspiring me. I hope it's inspiring other folks in the room as well. So thank you so much for sharing. Yes.
Before we go on to POW, so how can you make this happen though, when like I don't want to work all my weekends and nights, and like a lot of people, like they say, yeah, a lot of us can't code all the time, all the freaking time. And what I've realized, and I think a lot of people are afraid to ask, and this is harder earlier on, of course, but I even see like my senior friends who are like very well compensated not do this. And that is that you can ask to work less days, right? So with the industry we're in, if we, do some lifestyle choices, like I don't have a huge house, right? So, but so you can do things like work, 3 days a week, and then you can have 2 days to do side projects if that is what you really want, or to pursue then becoming kind of like, if you want to be a DevRel, right, you need to have something to show for yourself. You can do that in that time. Or like a very good friend of mine, an ex-colleague, like he is one of the most senior guys at one of the telecoms here in Norway. And they were like, oh, we want to make you a manager, and like, you're going to get so much more money. And he was like, what if I just work 3 days a week for the same money that I already have? And they were like, sure.
Yeah.
And he thought he was going to go in and be like, and they were like, fine, if that's what, if that's what it takes to keep you, right? So this is like further along the line, but like a lot of people like forget that you do have the possibilities to kind of do those types of asks, or find a place where you can get those kinds of they're not accommodations. It depends on still in Oslo, there's still a lack of developers, so we are little bit entitled.
I love that. As you should be.
Yeah, but so I just wanted to say that, because like I don't think we should be, well, there's seasons in life, right? There are times when you can do it, but I don't think it should be the norm that we all work like more than the normal amount or the
Yeah.
standard amount. Yeah.
Of course, of course. I understand that completely. And again, just kind of like inspiring to hear you encourage folks that like, especially when you feel like proven your value, you've put in the work, you know, like you won't get what you don't ask for. So might as well, you know what I mean, put that in a line if it's something that's important to you. So I definitely love that note that you give there. All right, but we would also love to hear about your other project that came before Prune Your Follows, which is POW, a menstrual tracker. So we'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, so that was also one of the times in my life where I was like, no more side projects for you. So I was like, what can I then do with all my, I guess, creative energy or whatever we want to call this thing that makes me not just like stay in a regular job. So I started, I think Lillian was like, yeah, I was also kind of out of like the early days with her. And I was like, okay. And I saw this, somebody was inviting Sanity actually, anyway, was inviting to Global CFP Day,
Okay.
Global Diversity CFP Day. I don't know if they're still around, but it was like a super initiative. And the point there was to teach underrepresented groups how to send in pitches for talks. So a CFP is a call for proposal, which means that almost all tech conferences all tech conferences will put out a CFP where they are asking you to pitch them a talk. I thought for many years that this was like some secret society you had to be invited to. It is not. Like they say, please send me your pitch. So that's what I learned at this Global CFP Day. They also help you write a bio so you sound kick-ass. And I had plenty of ideas. But then one of the things they said was like, maybe do a talk proposal on something that you want to learn more about. Because you often get accepted on an abstract and then you do the talk like 3, 4, 5 months down the road so you can learn the thing after you've gotten approved. And I was reading this article in the Wall Street Journal, or in our Norwegian newspaper, that was referencing the Wall Street Journal about how most of the menstrual apps and other health apps were sharing the data with ad brokers such as Facebook. So you log your period, they tell Facebook, you get ads based on where you are in your cycle. And this was like a big thing. And I was like, wow, like how could you make an app that would prohibit me as a developer for like ever landing in such a situation, or prohibiting it that I could never share this data. So I wrote a talk abstract on a privacy-focused menstrual tracker. Is it even possible? And I just listed my feature requests. Like I wanted it to be on web. I wanted it to be available on multiple devices, and some other things. And I got accepted to like 5 or 4, like a lot of conferences wanted to hear this talk. Not that many people want to talk about menstruation on stage on a tech conference. So it ended up becoming a talk about encryption. And because I hate making PowerPoints, while I was supposed to make the PowerPoint or the slides, I guess it's not PowerPoint anymore, but the slides, I just made the app instead. So that's how that came about. Then there was a follow-up article in the Norwegian newspaper, and this journalist wrote about like how awful this was, blah, blah, blah. And I called her, or I emailed her, and I'm like, oh, I'm making an alternative. And then she calls me and she's like, oh, cool. When are you launching? I'm like, March 8th. So that's how it came to become an app. And that was March 8th, 2020. So I had a big launch party, and then like the world shut down. And people were like, you can't market now, because I should never have listened to that. But so it kind of like took the momentum a little bit away from me. And then I started the YouTube channel to like have something to do. And then I keep it alive. You have 50 active subscribers, but I have not been giving it the love that it really deserves. And this is the thing, like sometimes I do these things and then I put them out there and people are super excited. And then that just makes me like scared. Like it gets like, I don't know, like the pressure, like what, like, what if it's not good? Like what? And then I convince myself everybody hates it, nobody uses it. And but then something went down the other day and I got like 3 support messages like, I can't log in, can you help me? And I was like, oh, people are using it. So now I'm a little encouraged again. But yeah. But then it's the whole thing where I've realized during all my experimentation that I don't really want to run a business. So I'm like, it's mulling in the back of my head, like, what can I do with POW? Maybe it can become an open source project where people can contribute and I could be a place for them to start contributing. Or I actually, do some more development work and sell it, because it turns out you can sell things, you can sell side projects. I learned a lot in my years. But then that also brought me to MicroConf in Minneapolis last year, because they had a diversity scholarship. So I was like, okay, I'll apply for that. And then I met all these SaaS founders of little SaaSes, and they were so miserable, so many of them. And that's when I was like, do I really want to make, like, do I want to run one SaaS for the rest of my life? I don't know.
Yeah.
Clip this out if you put it on YouTube. No, it's just her. But I think they had a lot of fun. I don't know if they were miserable, but like the conversations they had were not interesting to me. Like it was all about churn and like the business of it. And I was like, I want to talk tech. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely not in the right space, and I don't have the interest to kind of like make a SaaS be my main, like an indie SaaS be my main income, which is kind of the holy grail. Like if you're on the internet, like everybody is like, oh, that's going to be amazing. And like, oh, you have 50 customers. This is going to be like, you could do anything. And then I just realized, like, but then you don't code anymore. Like you have to spend all your time on anyway. So
other things, that maybe are not your priority.
I hope you all feel so inspired by my like non-vision.
I don't think it's non-vision at all. I think I'm inspired by you just kind of like going, like, first of all, the self-awareness, like you're very aware of like, no, these are my passions, these are my strengths, like this is what I want to focus on. I think that's kind of like what's standing out to me personally is like recognizing that, because then you can kind of like really follow your own path. And kind of speaking of which, earlier you mentioned, I just want to be talking about tech. Like, I don't want to talk about the business part. I want to be talking about tech. And I think that is kind of inspiring, again, like your YouTube channel. And I know that you mentioned earlier that you do a lot of live coding and tutorials, even though that was something that initially scared you. Again, just like that kind of like braveness is really inspiring to me, of just like going for something that you're a little bit scared of. But I'd love for you to touch on that, because obviously at Codesmith, we're an educational institution, and teaching software engineering can be very tricky, you know what I mean? Because there are so many ways to go about it. And I think that also doing it in a remote environment and maybe using social media also has, its challenges. So I would kind of love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what is teaching like remotely? What are some of your best practices? What have been some of your challenges?
Yes, it's funny because in our pre-chat, you called me a teacher and I feel like a lot of the things we do live coding, it's teaching, but and I guess I've done teaching as well. I've had webinars, but these labels are really hard. Like this is one of the things, like with the whole POW thing too, where I became like the hormone, like the menstrual person. I was like, no, I'm a developer. Like it's so hard to let go, and sometimes you need to let go of your kind of identities, and other times you kind of lean into them. But anyway, and the same thing, I can't say content creator with a straight face. Oh, I just did. I've been practicing. So teacher too, it's hard because it's like, no, that's not me. But yeah, so I don't know if I've gone into like thinking so much about like how to teach or what, like how that should happen. It's more showing the process that the way I would have done it, and showing how I would have done it, or how I do it. And I think that what I've gotten feedback on is, and I know other live streamers too is that it's really nice, especially for juniors, to see seniors struggle. And it's like we struggle just as much, but you just don't get as discouraged because you've been like, you've seen it before. Or you've seen something similar, or that if you persist, like you can figure it out. And seeing that live is helpful for people. Then again, if they come back and watch it again and again and again, because like watching people live stream takes a lot of time. So I don't recommend you just like do that a lot, but like jumping into different streams and seeing people you feel are more senior coding and like see their struggles can like at least help you not to kind of give up. I guess, or feel like, oh, you know, I'm so stupid. It's just like, well, this is the process, right? It's problem solving. We problem solve and problem solve and problem solve. It's going to be freaking exhausting sometimes. And then you should not keep going. You should go for a walk or dance or like sleep or shower or something like that, that we all learn and never do, but that's what you should do. So, dance is my favorite. But anyway, so I think that like teaching styles, like teaching remotely, so I've never taught in person. It's actually one thing that I have thought about, that it could be, you know, there are different colleges here doing 3-year programs, and I know they're looking for JavaScript instructors every now and then. And if I really want to lean into the YouTube channel as kind of a both a learning or like a teaching type videos and more like lifestyle videos, do like a combination, I think having that in-person experience will probably make those better, because you will see people struggle. Like people on your live stream, they will just kind of fade out. You know, they won't be like, oh, I didn't like the way you did that, or like I didn't understand. Like they won't ask. And I've heard also in live education that people often won't ask, but you can see that they're struggling, and then you can like proactively kind of ask them what is your struggle, and then you can become a better instructor that way, or like teacher that way. So that could be an interesting avenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that. I mean, as somebody who is an instructor in Codesmith, I think a lot of what you're talking about really resonates with me. You know, you mentioned just kind of like, you know, the intricacies of live coding and how intimidating it is, you know, and I personally have given a few demos in my classes, things that I've practiced, things that I know to do. And it's like, I'll just miss, you know, like a letter, like you said earlier, or something like that, or somebody asks a question and you lose your flow and something happens and it's like, oh, you know, like live coding, bane of my existence, you know. And so, but I appreciate that, because kind of like what you were saying, I love what you said about how seeing your seniors, seeing people that you look up to struggle and also hit blocks and things, I think that is really where you can gain strength from. I think one of the most important things we do here at Codesmith is that we do give a talk on imposter syndrome, because I think it is important to remind everyone that at whatever level you're at, there's always going to be this feeling of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why am I making this mistake? What is happening? You know what I mean? But I'm doing the best I can. And really the industry is all about, engineering is all about fixing problems, hitting blocks. You know, I think somebody mentioned it in the chat that a big part of like how we get students to join us is through our technical interviews, and we look for people to hit blocks so that we know if they're resourceful, like what their temperament is like when they are. So very, very important things that you definitely touched on. So it's nice to hear that from you. So really wonderful point there. Anyway,
Yeah, so just to clarify, as you said,
yes.
like I was scared of live coding. Like I was sitting here like freaking out, like sweating. I think nobody, well, I had a friend who showed up for my first live stream. We still won't have like a huge attendance, but like it was just like, it was insane. Like but then I did it and I loved it.
Yes.
And it gave me so much energy. And that's back to like you said about or like calling me brave.
Yeah.
which I have kind of realized I am. Like that was brave for me. Some
Yes.
other things that I have done that people think are brave are not brave, because I was not scared of them, right? So I think like the definition of brave is doing something that you are scared of. Like you are scared but you're doing it anyway, then you're brave. Like if you're not scared, you're not brave. You're just like it's like, you know, you just do it, right? So and I do think that I've realized a lot of things that I'm fearful of, I often make fun of, and then I realize it's fair, and then when I do it, sometimes I love it, like live streaming, because I was like, who watches live stream? Like, oh, everybody out there showing off, you know, and it was just me, like, you know, masking my fear of like, you know, never thinking I could never do that.
Yes.
And then now I don't have it from the top of my head, but I've done, like conference speaking, I enjoy, but I don't love, like it doesn't give me a lot of energy. I love the social aspect and networking and all of that. But other people, like, yeah, it depends, but you have to like try them. You can't imagine how it is to do a TikTok. You can't imagine how it's going to be to live code. You kind of have to do it. And then you're allowed to be like, oh, I live code for like 5 sessions. And if I still like, if I don't enjoy it, like stop doing it. There's other things you could do. You could blog, you could make videos, you could make podcasts. You know, there's other things you could do in like that would give you the same type of results, which is exposure and
Mhm.
thinking through your own learnings.
Yeah.
You know, there's different formats and you can find the one that you enjoy and that you can keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Finding different avenues that kind of like speak to you.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So we are nearing the hour, but I would definitely love to open up the floor to any of our
I have
attendees.
time.
We
My
can,
family's
yeah.
finally sleeping, so I have time.
Great, amazing. So please, if anybody in the room would love to pose a question for Ray, we would love to hear it. Anyone?
Somebody's asking something in the chat.
Okay.
It's a
Let's
question.
start with Will, and then
Okay.
we'll parse through the chat.
Hi, Benedict. Thanks so much. That was amazing to hear you talk, and honestly, like, something I think about a lot, about how alums, and including myself, honestly, but like, how do we design our best professional life, as you described, like the number of hours that I wrote the question in the chat, and I didn't post it because I wanted to, it sounds like a really over the, you know, it's a massive question, but I wanted to see if you had any suggestions, like, you know, how you structure your week, how you find collaborators, how you honestly kind of put the pressure on oneself. One of the worst things about work is it can fill the time available, and like all these other side projects, they don't have the deadlines in the same way and things like that. So I'd just be curious, were there any people you looked to, any kind of mentors, any guidebooks, any sort of little sort of silver bullets almost that helped you start to design your kind of best professional life, as opposed to just sort of taking it as is, a job 5 days a week, engineering X number of hours? Were there any like little nuggets that helped you take such a big step with that boldness?
It's hard to say. I think it's very much one of those, like, a drop becomes an ocean or something like that. I've always been curious and wanting to learn more, both like with tech and taking courses. Like, I bought so many courses. I've done quite a few of them. I binge watch your course. I think that's how I know you from Twitter. It's my pandemic thing, was JS the hard parts, drinking wine and binge watching that thing. But anyway, so just like through that, like learning and keep on learning about kind of yourself. I think also my partner helps a lot. Like, he's always like, but what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. And like, what? And also back to the family situation, my family's filled with entrepreneurs. Like, none of them really have real jobs. So that it was kind of a little bit inevitable. But then, like, silver bullets, I've read, well, that was quite late. I think like I read, like everybody, I guess, in my generation, the 4-hour work week at some point, where you were like, oh, I'm just going to live off of passive income. Did not make that happen. But like, it starts to, you know, to questioning kind of like how that you could do things very differently, and kind of always been interested in that kind of content. There is a book that I now can't remember the name of. It's by that was recommended me by Swizek on Twitter. He's like quite large on Twitter, but he did like a mentorship thing. I paid for that when I was making POW to have some accountability. And one of the books he suggested was by this crazy singer. What's her name? Her band is Dressed in Dolls. Anyway, I'll send you the link and you can like share it afterwards. And she just have like this completely different life where she just like asks for what she wants. Like, if she's gonna have a concert in some city, she's like, who can put me up for the night? And like, should we do, like, she'll just be like asking for things. And like, she lives off of Patreon support now, I think. So like, yeah, just reading a lot, I guess, and be very uncritical in your reading, and not just read tech stuff, because like the tech bro culture on Twitter and like all their kind of the people they read and the hustle culture thing, not my thing. But I don't know if I answered any of your questions.
No, that's
I think
yeah, I mean,
it's like a lot of little drip
no, it's
drips,
hugely
but
helpful. And I, and honestly, probably, I hope that, you know, to some extent, you saw in the comments people saying that hearing you will, because it is also about like somebody saying you can. So yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, like my friend who got his 3 days a week in like a regular job with like still his good salary. I was like, oh, even that's possible, because I kind of said that, you know, traditional Norwegian companies wouldn't allow that. But then when I started contracting again, after doing a lot of other things, we had an iPhone app that we made like $4,000 a month off of for like way back. Yeah, that was my only passive income, but that was like back in 2004. But yeah, that we didn't get to that part of this. Anyway, what was I thinking? Yeah. So then when I went back to contracting for these large organizations, I was like, oh, but I only work like whatever hours. And you can phrase it as like, I'm only available to you for 20 hours a week. They don't have to know what you do with the rest of the time. Like if you want to dance or like sleep, you don't have to explain yourself all the time. So if you just say like, I'm available for 20 hours at a time, then like they can do that, or they can say yes or they can say no, right? So I think, yeah. So I think that he inspired me in that way. Like, oh, even these large organizations can be pretty flexible as soon as you're in. But then you had another question. It's like, how do you get stuff done when there are no deadlines? Like, I cannot work without deadlines. As you noticed, the app got released because I'd promised a large Norwegian newspaper it was going to be released. So I create external deadlines for myself for things that I am internally motivated to do, but I can't internally motivate myself to finish anything. So I need external accountability to do that. So I create that external accountability. And that's what I've used Twitter for a lot. And it's funny, like, I don't need people to be like, oh, do you remember you promised on Twitter that you would do yoga every day? Like, nobody has to say that, but I said it. I know I said it. Like, there's accountability there. And that I learned from the Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, a non-scientific book about different personality types. And that's where I learned to not apologize for being somebody who cannot I am internally motivated, but I can't internally hold myself accountable. So instead of being like, oh, I should get better self-discipline and like, I should become a better person, I just accept that I need external accountability and then I make it. But what I've burned out on is because I also accept other people's external accountability that I haven't asked for, right? So if somebody expects things from me, I'll do it. So what I learned from that book is like, well, I'll have to control my external accountabilities or my external expectations. But that is a work in progress, like all of us, right? So yeah.
I love that. I think one of the things that is definitely like resonating with me and inspiring me is just like kind of like acknowledging that people learn very differently, people work very differently, and you don't have to be a specific way to achieve success or to be able to accomplish a lot of things. And so I think another point of inspiration there is just like recognizing like what your needs are, how you learn, how you work, and then kind of like figuring out what works best for you, because there are ways to do that. So external accountability, love that you're using things around you to kind of like keep you motivated. I really, really enjoy that for sure. All right. Well, I know it is the end of the hour for sure. But before we kind of like definitely close this out, one last question that I would definitely want to pose to you, Ray, is for any folks in the room who are still, especially in those that are beginning their software engineering journey, and even for those that haven't, maybe even for seasoned engineers, like what piece of advice would you give them? I know it's pretty broad, but it's, you know, I already have picked up on a lot of lessons that we've picked up from you, but is there anything else that's specific that you're like, I wish I knew this before, you know, this is something I will give you today?
Yeah, so my thing is, which is so funny because everybody says it and like, you know, you probably should do it, and I didn't do it and I regret not doing it earlier. And that is just like, start a blog and just call it your name, and then just write little notes to yourselves, because I was always like, oh, we need to brand this. I've had like 10 blogs. Like, what if all of them were one blog? I would have had like 20, not 20, because I didn't have a blog then, but 15 years of blog posts, like not like 2 years that I have now. And I started blogging again, and it takes about a year for like Google to pick it up. And then you start seeing a little bit of growth. And it's amazing, as soon as you start writing about something or live streaming about it or doing videos or whatever, like some consistent content creation about what you're learning and what you're doing, is that people start looking at you as you like essentially like more special than you actually like they should. Like the last contracting interview I went to, like I've never had this happen to me before now, but like this guy was looking at me like he was just like, I can't believe like you're in the room with me. I'm like, oh, like, you know, like, and of course it was much easier to get that opportunity. I didn't have to prove myself there and then in that room that I was kind of knowledgeable about what I was talking about. So, and this other guy that I've followed, like now had like a 20th anniversary on his blog. And it's been about everything. So that's a cool thing. If you just make it your name, or like it's in it, like, but just like make it, you can write about anything that interests you, and like there will become a red thread, or it will change, right? You'll talk a lot about, you know, like Jamstack, and then you'll talk a lot about maybe hardware because you ended up going in that direction, but you kind of have that body of work. It's just insane, like the opportunities and the help that will be. And in the beginning, nobody's going to read it anyway. So like, that's when you want to practice being a bad writer or a bad video person. So when it actually picks up, and when like things are actually moving along, just by the sheer virtue of practicing, you will be pretty good, and people, you know, it will be there out, you know, speaking for you. And like something the grifters say, like it will like increase your luck surface area or something like that.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Raae, for spending your time with us. It's such a great lesson there. And I think that, you know, it really aligns with kind of like where we want to bring Codesmith as well. You know, we're really looking forward to inspiring our alums, inspiring our residents to creating community outside of Codesmith, and becoming speakers, and really building on networking and using tools and resources like social media to be able to strengthen that and kind of like build on that. And so this is definitely such an inspiring discussion, because out of everything you said, you know what I mean, all of your tools, it just feels more accessible. You know, it's not as intimidating, feels accessible. You just got to believe in yourself. You got to just go for it. So really loving all the lessons that you shared with us today.